So today we're talking about how enabling can hurt the whole family. And part of our intervention curriculum involves us moving away from the conversation of what enabling does for a substance user or a person with a mental health disorder, and to start talking about what it does for the enabler. So much conversation involves, what benefits somebody receives from an enabler, such as, money or comfort or housing, etc. But we rarely talk about why the family enables and what the effects are. So the first thing I want to go over is, why do people enable? And why do people enable addiction and mental health disorders? And the reason most people enable is they get something from it. There's a benefit that is received when we enable another person. And a lot of times when people call our office, even our family recovery coaching, the conversation is about mental health. And I'm not discounting any mental health disorders that are present or any symptoms that are being exhibited by the patient, your loved one. But what we have found is that most people want to believe that it is a mental health disorder as a primary. And the reason for this is because they disclose later on that if it were a mental health disorder, there's a more justifiable excuse to enable the behaviors. When it's an addiction, families concede to the fact that the enabling feels wrong. They know it's not helping the person. But by saying it's a mental health disorder, they can digest a little easier that the enabling is something that has to be done because they believe that's a different animal. So people enable mostly because they're hiding something. They're getting something, such as a benefit received of being needed in the relationship, serving a purpose, not wanting the person mad at us, not wanting to disclose or unearth any types of family secrets. And guys, let's face it, no family's perfect. Every single one of us has something where we feel guilty, we feel shamed, or we wish we could take back the clock of time and correct. And you can't. All we can do is move forward and change our behaviors. Because one thing I know that I also wrote in the article is that we've never had a situation where somebody said they're better or sober because they were comforted and enabled by somebody. And nobody gets well when they don't have to face consequences or accountability. So the enabling behaviors absolutely creates a ripple effect in the family system. So if I ask a room full of people what the problem is, they're all going to tell me it's the person with substance use or mental health disorder. And they wouldn't be wrong, but there's a lot more to it. When the primary enabler gives all of their attention to the substance user or the person with mental health, all the other relationships in the family suffer, and maladaptive, unhealthy family roles are acquired and they act out. And I've explained these roles in the article. And what happens is the family system is trying to balance itself out to basically absorb and cope with, maladaptively, mind you, with the dysfunction, because the one person, the primary enabler, has decided to give all of their attention to one person. And that takes away attention and affirmation and love. I know that's not the person's intention, but it does take those things away from all the other family members, and resentments and anger and hostility brew, and unbeknownst to the people that are affected. So people often ask, does enabling encourage people to go to treatment, or does it help them to go to treatment any quicker? And the quick answer is it doesn't. And we've never had a documented case where a family enabled their loved one and they decided to go. The second stage of change, the contemplation stage, you have to have ambivalence, meaning you have to see both sides of the argument. And as long as it is perceived that there is less of a reason to address the problem than there is to address the problem, then people will not address the problem. Enabling disables people from seeing the need to do something different. So when we have families that do an intervention, our loved one says no, and that person wants to make one last ditch effort to get the family turned back around to, back to the status quo, this is where families are most vulnerable. And this is where they want to go back to enable, give them one last, dose of comfort, or one last, handful of money, or whatever it is they want to do, because they want so badly for their loved one to just accept the help and go. And that always derails the process and it sets us back. And when families do that and the substance user or the person with mental health disorder gets their foot back in the door, it's even harder for families to recover. So enabling absolutely encourages negative behavior. And if we go back to the Kraft model of addiction, and you can research that on our website, it even states, and this is an evidence-based model, that we do not encourage bad behavior. We only encourage and reward good behavior. And when you encourage negative behavior, it's like an operant conditioning. That's the theory of the Kraft model. And the longer we enable and the longer we comfort somebody's addiction or mental health, we're teaching that person that we're okay with what they're doing. Even when we say we're not, it's not in what we say, it's in what we do. And the person who needs help will continue to push that agenda and hold the enabler hostage, making them feel guilty or horrible or shameful if they don't keep doing what they're doing, by providing comfort for them so they can continue in the status quo. So at the end of the day, families are affected mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially by the addiction. And we're always talking about how the enabling affects the substance user. And we have to start looking at what it's doing for the entire family and all the family members in the family system. Families are beaten up and torn down when they call our office. And so many families are afraid of doing an intervention because they'll say, well, what if the person says no? And I even talk about it in the article attached to this video, where families, believe it or not, and I know this is going to sound strange, some people may be angered by it, but families aren't worried about a no. They know how to do a no. But by the time you've called my office, you've been doing no for 10, 15, 20 years. Your biggest fear is, what if they say yes? Because you don't know what that looks like. And that's called the fear of the unknown. And that's what paralyzes people. Anytime somebody says, what if they say no? That's a question I need to be asking you. If they say no, are you going to say, okay, let's continue as is? Or are you going to do something different? Your biggest fear is that they say yes, and then things will get quiet. Because somewhere in there at your core, you know that if your loved one goes to treatment, things are going to happen. We're going to reset the family system. We're going to unearth family secrets. They're going to talk about their family when they're in treatment. And at the end of the day, you could be selfishly keeping your person sick for the fear of the unknown change that comes with doing something about the problem. So an enabler and a family system of dysfunction runs deep. This isn't as simple as let's just intervene and talk them into rehab. People who go forward with our intervention services, they have to surrender to the fact that things are going to get difficult, and it's all necessary change, because recovery from drug and alcohol and mental health disorders is not an easy solution. But I assure you that once you get through the trials and tribulations, the end goal will be far worth it.